Good afternoon and welcome to our Ambassador and Diplomat series here at Global Cleveland, coming to you live from our Zoom studio. My name is Joe Simperman. I'm the president of Global Cleveland, and I'm thrilled to be with you today on this most auspicious occasion as we welcome back the great ambassador to the United States from Ireland, Dan Mulhall. A few notes. First, we'd like to thank RelateCare for their incredible and generous sponsorship for today's session. We'll be hearing from Mark Owens shortly. We'd also like to thank the Irish Network of Cleveland, the Consul General of Chicago's office, as well as the Galway County Chamber. We're so thrilled to have so many of you here and so thrilled that we're able to have the ambassador during this month, which just yesterday was declared by our president, Irish American Heritage Month, where the president writes, "Since before the founding of our nation, Irish immigrants have arrived on our shores with an unyielding spirit of determination that has helped define America's soul and shape our success across generations. That fabric of modern America is woven through with the green of the Emerald Isle." And the president specifically notes the entrepreneurs and the people who are here of Irish heritage who make things happen. One of those individuals is a dear friend of all of us in Cleveland, and certainly someone who's known internationally. Mr. Christopher Connor, the retired chairman of the board and chief executive officer of Sherwin-Williams, a 155-year-old global leader in paints and coatings, will be introducing our ambassador. Over Chris's 34-year career, he held a number of increasingly important leadership roles. But the truth is, Chris started out in a role at Sherwin-Williams and worked his way up until he was promoted to CEO in 1999 and retired from that position in December of 2016. Prior to being at Sherwin-Williams, Chris was a student at Ohio State University, and he's someone who is known in Cleveland for his continued activism and his work in our entire city. He serves on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, University Hospitals, and the Playhouse Square Foundation boards. He is someone who defines being an Irish American. He is an entrepreneur. He is brilliant. He is loved. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Connor.
Thank you, Joe, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce the Ambassador of Ireland to the United States, Ambassador Daniel Mulhall, and give him a warm welcome to the great Irish stronghold city of Cleveland, Ohio. Ambassador Mulhall has been a longtime friend to Cleveland's Irish community, and we cherish our special sister city relationship with the Irish city of West Mayo, which has been our sister city since 2003. Ambassador Mulhall is a lifelong advocate of public diplomacy, as well as a published author on Irish history and literature. Ambassador Mulhall joined the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1978 and has had an impressive career. He's had assignments in New Delhi, Vienna, Brussels, Edinburgh, Malaysia, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, London, as well as serving nationally as part of the Irish government's delegation at the time of the Good Friday Agreement, 1998. Today, we want to say thanks to RelateCare for sponsoring Global Cleveland's Ambassador and Diplomat series, as well as the support of the Galway Chamber, the Consulate General of Ireland in Chicago, and the Irish Network of Cleveland. For those of you on Twitter, please feel free to tweet an Ambassador Mulhall, as he is an expert Twitterer with daily updates. He can be reached at @Dan Mulhall. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce and welcome to Cleveland, Ambassador Daniel Mulhall.
Thank you very much for those warm words of welcome. I only wish I could be there in reality as opposed to in the virtual space, but we've all become accustomed maybe over the last year to living in this virtual world, and we're all hoping that we can get back to face-to-face activities sooner rather than later, and that's the hope we all have for this year of 2021. We have to regard 2020 as an exceptional write-off year when we were all confined to barracks, more or less. Certainly I have been. I haven't left the Washington area since since March of last year. But in any case, I want to say that I had a very enjoyable, memorable trip to Cleveland, and I yearned to get back there. I was supposed to be back there last year for what was supposed to have been the Irish Network USA annual conference, but of course it fell foul of the pandemic, like so many other things did. I didn't make it there, but I will be coming back as soon as conditions permit. I promise that. I often talk about Cleveland when I'm asked to talk about the American economy, especially when I'm asked by Irish audiences to talk about America and my impressions of America. I almost always refer to Cleveland because, and the point I make to people in Ireland is that this is a mid-sized American city, right? It's not Chicago, it's not New York, it's not Boston, it's not LA or the big cities in Texas, and yet it has an institution that is known the world over, namely the Cleveland Clinic. And I remember going there and meeting people from the clinic on my visits to Cleveland and being so hugely impressed by what's been achieved there. And that, to me, I give that message to people in Ireland as a kind of an inspirational message to tell people, look, you don't have to be New York, you don't have to be LA or San Francisco or Houston to be a place which can host global entities, like globally renowned entities like the Cleveland Clinic. You have institutions of that quality all over the United States, but Cleveland is a very good example of a city that's managed to host a globally renowned institution to which people from all over the world flock for medical treatment. And that's, I think, a very good message for other parts of the world who are trying to find ways of developing their own economic potential, to see what Cleveland has done in what's been done in Cleveland with the creation and the development of the Cleveland Clinic. And I'm delighted that a company from my home place, Waterford in Ireland, is closely involved with the work of the Cleveland Clinic, RelateCare, and I'm glad to see Mark Owens on the call today. I actually visited the offices of RelateCare in Waterford last time I was home, more than a year ago now. Longest spell I've spent away from Ireland, and I don't know that I'll get back anytime before the summer of this year. But in any case, I visited, and it was great to see the way in which they're connected with Cleveland. From Waterford to Cleveland, there is this connection through RelateCare. And also, of course, we have the Galway connection, epitomized today by Kenneth Deery being on this call. And I should never forget the most vital connection of all, the Mayo connection. And I'll never forget the day I was in Cleveland, that evening. I think Mark organized, or someone organized, for me to attend an Irish community event. And I met like more than 100 people there, I'm sure. And the vast majority of them were not just from Mayo, they were descended from people who came from Achill Island. So a very specific migration from Achill Island that ended up in Cleveland. And of course, more recently, the Cleveland connection with Ireland was nurtured by the presence in Ireland of a Cleveland native, Edward Crawford, as the US ambassador to Ireland. Just finished his term in January, and I want to pay tribute to Ambassador Crawford for the work he did in connecting our two countries and encouraging links, economic links between Ireland and the United States, and of course in representing the best of Cleveland in Ireland as America's ambassador to our country. I want to also thank Global Cleveland for hosting this event. Joe Simperman and his colleagues at Global Cleveland, thank you for making it possible for me to speak to an audience in Cleveland this afternoon. Let me just say a few things, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. The first thing I want to say, because this is what people have described to me as the holy month of March, St. Patrick's month, as some people call it. So it's appropriate, I suppose, during St. Patrick's month, we're already in it a few days, to reflect on the Irish-US relationship, which is the British say they have a special relationship with the United States. I don't want to take that label from them, that a title from them. That would be stealing intellectual property or whatever it is, political property, or stealing a slogan anyway from our neighbors. We wouldn't want to do that. We want to have our own slogan. So I tend to say, we have a unique relationship with the United States, right? And uniqueness and specialness are both, in the same category. But I prefer the idea of unique relationship. And the reason I say it's unique, it's not because I'm just looking for for a handy word to describe the relationship, and one that would make a good soundbite. It's not bad. It's more that I see it having three strands which make it unique. And the first is the fact that millions of Irish people came here in the 19th and 20th centuries and helped America to be what it is today. And we've now got 10% of the population, maybe more, because a lot more people are discovering Irish roots now because of the Ancestry and 23andMe doing their DNA testing. They're discovering that they have Irish roots they didn't know about. We recently, last year, the Irish African American Diaspora Network was established in New York, and they reckon that a good percentage of today's African Americans have Irish historical roots, family roots. So that established a very, very strong base for the Irish-American relationship, that you have, like, at the moment, 35 million plus people who have a heritage that comes from Ireland. And so many of them are impressively proud of that heritage. And that includes, of course, notably at the moment, President Joseph Biden, who, if you read, I recommend anyone who's interested in this subject to read what the president said, what he wrote in the proclamation he issued this week, announcing that this month of March would be Irish Heritage Month. And this happens every year, of course, but normally the prose is, fairly sort of standard kind of official prose, very calm, very measured, very, very, very low key. But if you read what's in the proclamation this year, because of President Biden, it is full of the most extraordinarily warm and positive sentiments towards the president's own Irish heritage and the importance of Irish heritage in the United States. So that's the first thing. So there's this very deep well of Irish involvement in the evolution of the United States, stretching back to the 18th century and beyond, but in particular, the second half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th. When, large numbers of Irish people came here and helped and became part of the fabric of America and helped make America what it is today. The second thing is the shared values that we have. We are both, I suppose, products of the Enlightenment. We're both countries that believe in the rule of law, in democracy, and pluralism, in human rights, and freedom of expression, and freedom of religion. All the things that are characteristic of the American experience historically, going back to the American Revolution, are things that are shared very fully by people in Ireland. They're part of our culture as well. So we have a shared culture in that sense, and we share political culture, a shared kind of philosophical outlook, this sort of in the Enlightenment, derived from the European Enlightenment, but developed here in the United States, and then, influenced people around the world, including in Ireland. And I have no doubt but that our independence movement was very strongly influenced by the American example and by help that came from America to enable Ireland to successfully push for independence a century ago. And that's shared, and also because we have a shared culture. Irish people, they don't regard America hardly as a foreign country because they're so exposed to America. Whenever this came home to me, last year, when I was talking to a senior Irish political figure, and we talked about stuff that we had to talk about, and he said to me, "Oh, what's going on there?" And I gave him a summary of what was happening in the American news cycle at that time. A lot of things happening last year in the election cycle. And he said, "Oh, I know about that." He said, "I was watching CNN last night." So vast numbers of Irish people follow what happens in America in a way that Americans do. In other words, they don't follow it as something that's exotic and distant. They follow it as something that's in their homes every evening. A lot of Irish people who are interested in news and politics would maybe watch the American news channels in late in the evening when it's kind of prime time here, but it's late in Ireland, and people who stay up late and are news junkies tend to very often watch hearings in the Congress and know about what's happening here in a detailed way. So that's what I'm saying about this kind of shared culture, shared political culture, and shared culture as well in terms of literature, and Irish people obviously, read American literature quite a lot. They watch American movies, they watch American plays, they listen to American podcasts, and you name it. So across the board, probably no other country in Europe has as much exposure to America as we have. And then the third thing is also important, which is it's the most important thing at the moment, and that is the extraordinary economic relationship that exists between our two countries, with 750 US companies investing in Ireland, employing about 160,000 people. It's about 8% of our workforce. And then you have about 110,000 Americans work for 800 Irish companies here in the United States. And that's a growing number. It's growing every year. New companies coming into the market here every single year, expanding the footprint of Irish companies here in the United States and increasing the number of people who work for Irish companies in America. And of course, we also have vast flows of trade back and forth between our two countries. So that's why I say you put those three things together: the historical links through emigration, the shared values and the shared culture, and then thirdly, the economic interchange between us, which benefits both of our economies. That, I think, between those three elements, they construct what I would consider to be a unique relationship between our two countries. And the aim of the embassy and the consulates around the country is to move that unique relationship forward and to make it more unique, if you like, to kind of add strands to the bow so that it doesn't wither, because every relationship needs to be constantly refreshed, because otherwise it gets stale and people, lose interest or whatever. It's got to move forward if it's to prosper in the future. You cannot freeze things. You cannot set things in stone. They have to they have to evolve. And that's the mission of the embassy, to ensure that the evolution takes place and that it's a positive evolution that occurs. The second thing I want to mention is that Irish relations with the United States are situated within the broader European Union, United States relationship, which is very important to both sides. 6 million jobs on both sides of the Atlantic are dependent on trade between Europe and the United States. Unfortunately, the last few years, there have been quite a few trade disputes have broken out, and the relationship becomes slightly frayed because of these trade disputes. And there are now tariffs imposed by the United States on steel and aluminum imports from the European Union. The EU has retaliated with tariffs against US products coming into Europe. And then the Airbus-Boeing dispute gave rise to the US slapping on tariffs on a range of European goods, including goods from Ireland, even though Ireland has no involvement in the Airbus project. But we have suffered because of these tariffs that were imposed on Irish products. And then the EU has more recently imposed tariffs on the United States because of subsidies that the United States was giving to Boeing. So both sides have been subsidizing or been found guilty of subsidizing their respective aircraft manufacturers, and both sides have then slapped on tariffs to retaliate for those. And they're allowed to do that under WTO rules. Europe is allowed to put tariffs on the United States in retaliation for the Boeing subsidies, and the US is entitled to put tariffs on European goods in retaliation for the Airbus subsidies given by the European Union. So the point I want to make is that we need to resolve those problems. Those problems belong to the past, and they should be resolved, because in today's world, when we're trying to recover from a pandemic, having tariffs between Europe and the United States makes no sense at all, because those tariffs are only reduce trade, therefore jeopardize jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. And of course, the tariffs are paid by the consumer. So the consumer has to pay for these tariffs, and it pushes the cost of goods up, and it means that fewer goods are produced and fewer goods are consumed because the price goes up. And that is, I think, a small example of how that set of issues needs to be resolved in order to remove those burdens which are affecting the relationship between the United States and the European Union. And if those trade disputes about aluminum and steel and about the Airbus-Boeing subsidies, if they were resolved, that would actually boost trade between our two regions in a very positive way. And my hope would be that the new administration will find a way of resolving some of those trade disputes, and we'll get away from this idea of regarding the European Union in some kind of hostile way. The European Union and the United States are twins. They're political and economic twins. They have a lot in common. They're interdependent, and it makes no sense for us to be getting into wrangles over subsidies and tariffs when we ought to be working together to try and influence the global trading environment, which is changing all the time because of new powerful entities coming onto the scene and becoming more and more influential in global trade. I'm talking about countries that have emerged, like China, which is now a major force in world trade, and really the EU and the US need to work together to make sure that the rules of the game are set in a way that benefits our kind of economy and are not set in a way that benefits economies from other parts of the world, and that slants things to our disadvantage. And then the next point I want to make is about the pandemic. I mean, we've all suffered from this terrible virus. In Ireland, we had a bad experience early on. During the summer, the virus waned to a large degree because of the lockdown that was followed by Irish people with great dedication, I think, in March, April, May, June. We reopened the economy in the summer, and the virus rate of infection went up again in the fall. Another partial lockdown was imposed in October. That was lifted in December. We had a very bad January into February, where the infections went through the roof. But now they've come down to about 300 a day, 350 a day, which would be, in American terms, would be about 40,000 a day, and you're still up at 70,000. So we're still at a rate that's lower than the American rate. But for a time in January, we had one of the highest rates in the world. But there's a new lockdown now, which will remain in place for some weeks to come, I believe, and that is certainly having the effect of damping down the numbers of infections. Economically, there's been a big hit, of course, taken by the Irish government. It's like the American government's had to pump in money into the economy in order to save jobs and keep companies above water, so that these companies will be able to grow again and able to function again when the pandemic has passed, as it undoubtedly will sometime this year, or we hope. So huge economic hit, lots of support given to Irish business, to workers, to those who became unemployed because of the pandemic. So, our budget's been very badly hit in order to cope with the costs of keeping the economy, above water during this terrible time in our history. Our death rate is still, we've had more than 4,000 deaths now, but it's on a per capita basis about half the rate that applies here in the United States. So on a comparative scale, we've done quite well in keeping the death rate down to more modest levels than other countries have experienced. But of course, 4,000 is a lot of people to lose in a country like Ireland, and we don't take anything for granted. We're not complacent about it. We have a lot that we need to do still, and there's a lot of work to be done in trying to cope with the first of all, the rollout of the vaccine, which is going ahead, but we're a bit behind the United States in that regard. And then, of course, dealing with the cases that are currently generating hospitalizations and sadly daily deaths, although the number of deaths has come down quite a bit in the last few weeks. So, we look with confidence because our economy is strong, the fundamentals are good, and therefore we're primed for a very robust recovery in the coming months and years. But nonetheless, it's not wise to underestimate the savage impact that the pandemic has had on our economy. And people are getting tired of the lockdown. That's clear. I mean, there isn't the same resistance to lockdown and to measures that are recommended by government as there is here in other countries. But there's still a growing kind of unease in Ireland about the you know, the lockdowns, and people are getting tired. It's now been a year of not full lockdown, but substantial periods of lockdown during the past year, and that I think has generated a certain degree of weariness and desire to get back to normal life. But that desire exists everywhere in the world, I believe. We're not you know, unique in any way there. And then finally, I wanted to speak about St. Patrick's Day, as we're in this month now of St. Patrick's celebrations. This year, it will be a virtual St. Patrick's Day. I mean, I don't expect to attend any in-person events in the coming weeks. The Taoiseach's visit to the United States, which normally takes place around St. Patrick's Day, and it involves a full day of political meetings in Washington with the Vice President, the President, the Speaker, and the Congressional Friends of Ireland. That will be virtual this year. All those meetings will take place, but they'll all be in a virtual format, which is unfortunate, but it can't be helped. It's not avoidable, so we have to cope with it, and we're dealing with it, and we're going to try and make St. Patrick's Day in the virtual environment as close, make it match as closely as possible St. Patrick's Days of the past. But it's going to be difficult, it's going to be challenging, because the Taoiseach won't be here, and therefore we're relying on virtual platforms to sustain the visit. And all I can say is that I think everyone yearns for St. Patrick's Day 2022, and we can have a genuine, old style, normal St. Patrick's Day. Won't that be great? Fingers crossed. And I think especially with President Biden in the White House, I think next year St. Patrick's Day will be one for the ages. It'll be one to to remember, one to put into the memory bank, to savor for many years to come, because I know the President is enthusiastic about his Irish heritage, and therefore I think St. Patrick's Day next year will be a great occasion indeed for everyone involved. And just a final word about an issue that has dogged Ireland for the last number of years, that is the decision of the British people in 2016 to leave the European Union. They've now left the Union finally after a transition period in January of this year. The UK finally left the European Union, and happily there is an agreement between the two sides on how to regulate trade between us in the period ahead. That agreement is undergoing a certain number of teething troubles, and the sad reality from a British point of view is that the relationship with the EU will not be as good now, will not be as beneficial now as it was when they were members. You can't cease to be a member and hope to have exactly the same advantages as you had when you were a member. So British businesses and British people are beginning to understand that there are downsides, there are significant downsides to leaving the European Union. But for us, the main priority really is to protect the open border on the island of Ireland. And we now have a protocol signed by the EU and the UK and approved by both parliaments, which is an international agreement, which commits both sides to never having a border on the island of Ireland. But there have to be checks on the Irish Sea to make sure that goods coming across from Britain don't breach the rules of the single market and the European Customs Union. And that's creating a certain amount of teething trouble as well. But I'm confident it can be worked out. There are political arguments that Unionists in Northern Ireland make against the protocol. They believe that it separates them in some way from Britain. In our view, it doesn't do that at all. It has no constitutional significance. It is purely a set of practical arrangements to enable Northern Ireland to benefit from being a member of the European single market, having access to the European single market, and also being part of the UK single market. So it gives Northern Ireland a special status, but for some in Northern Ireland it's seen as a political issue, and we have to try and get around that and avoid that issue becoming a problem for us in the future. I want to say finally a word of gratitude to our friends in the United States, who over the last year or so have been very solid in insisting that there can never be a hard border on the island of Ireland, insisting that the British government should abide by the terms of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And I myself believe that, but for the pressure that came from Irish America and from the United States generally, I'm not sure that it would have been possible to reach an agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom on a future relationship, because the American factor, the pressure from the United States, from Irish America in particular, weighed very heavily with the British during those negotiations, and I think helped in no small way to bring about the agreement that was reached in December of last year, which is now in the process of being implemented. And there are teething troubles, but it's the only show in town, so we have to make it work in the coming months and years. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It was very insightful, and thanks for sharing those thoughts. And just so everyone is aware, we will have time for some Q&A at the end of this. And just kind of moving along on that, so we'll come back to you, Ambassador Mulhall, on that. We got some questions coming in as well. Up next, we got Consul General Kevin Byrne. Kevin is the newest Consul General in the Midwest, coming here in September 2020, coming right in the middle of a pandemic. And Kevin came to us at the office of the President of Ireland, and has been with the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs since 2010. So Consul General Kevin Byrne, I will turn it over to you for some words and some updates on your end. Thanks.
Mark, thanks so much, and big thanks, huge thanks to Global Cleveland for hosting this event. As the Ambassador said, it's Irish Heritage Month, so it's a great time to reflect on the links and connections between Ireland and the US. It's great to see Kenny Deery on the call as well, from Galway Chamber. He has an invisible hat for Mayo as well. I know he's always wearing that. So great to see Kenny as well. Look, the ambassador mentioned President Biden's proclamation, and I think I would urge everyone to, if you get a chance, to read it. There's a wonderful line in it where he says, "The fabric of modern America is woven through with the green of the Emerald Isle." Wonderful poetry there. Obviously, the current president is a fan of poetry, and it definitely comes through in the proclamation. And I think really there's no better example of that than the Irish in Cleveland. If we look at the history of the Irish in Cleveland. I have to say I was incredibly pleasantly surprised and shocked to see that the Irish in Cleveland have been celebrating St. Patrick's Day since 1842, so almost 180 years. I have an American friend that used to always say that 100 miles to an American is like 100 years to a European. It's no big deal, but 180 years is definitely a big deal. It's really something to be incredibly proud of. This means that the Irish in Cleveland were celebrating St. Patrick's Day 80 years before the foundation of the Irish state, which we'll be celebrating in the coming months. And the ambassador actually has a wonderful series called A Farther Shore, which is a series of lectures with centres of Irish studies right around the States that's taking place over the coming months. And it's really a reflection on the advent of Irish independence. So I'd encourage you all to check that out. It's definitely a really interesting series. We've one coming up in the Midwest at the end of this month with the University of Notre Dame. So I'll post about that in the chat box in case any of you are interested in it. But as I said, 180 years is really a phenomenal legacy to have. And while I know the parade can't go ahead this year for another year, the United Irish Societies of Greater Cleveland really have to be commended for their work in keeping this tradition alive. I know that past Taoiseach or Prime Minister have attended, government ministers have attended, Irish politicians have attended, my predecessors have attended, and I know that again, once we can get back to in-person events, that the parade will definitely see us visitors from Ireland coming down again, and very much looking forward to that. And I suppose while we can't celebrate St. Patrick's Day as we normally would, it doesn't mean that there isn't much to celebrate. Really, St. Patrick's Day is a celebration of three things. It's a celebration of family. I suppose it's an opportunity for families to reconnect with folks back home, with folks around the country, and to really celebrate that Irish links, those Irish links and that Irish heritage and their Irish culture. It's a celebration of community. The Irish community in the States is so strong, and it's so wonderful to see towns and villages right across the US go green for St. Patrick's Day. I've been lucky enough to experience St. Patrick's Day in the US a couple of times before. And I think the one thing that really struck me each time I go is that, while it's a celebration of all things Irish, it's not just a celebration for only those with Irish heritage. It's so wonderful to see the way it reaches out right across communities, and it's open to everyone from right across the States. And I think that's something that's really special that we see here in the States around St. Patrick's Day. I suppose the broader embrace of not just the Irish community, but others as Irish heritage and Irish culture is celebrated. And then the final thing is St. Patrick's Day. It's a celebration of connection. The ambassador spoke about the strength of the connection between Ireland and the US. And I know, obviously, speaking in Cleveland, when we say Ireland, that means Mayo. I learned very quickly in my time here that Mayo really is a superpower of the Irish diaspora here in the Midwest. Unfortunately, I've no Mayo blood in me myself, but I did spend all of my holidays in the beautiful yet freezing cold waters just off Achill Island. So it's definitely far from where I grew up, but definitely close to my heart. And as well, I suppose, just before I close, I want to really commend the Mayo Society of Greater Cleveland and the Sister Cities Committee for all that they do. The ambassador mentioned that consulates and embassies, our role is to strengthen those ties and to renew those ties between Ireland and the US. Really, you know, we can only do so much. So much of what we do is a result of all of the great work that's done between local groups, you know, cities right throughout the US. So it's great to see the strength of the Sister Cities relationship here between Cleveland and Mayo. And I know that there's a Sister Cities conference being organized by Global Cleveland later on in the year, and that there's a number of mini conferences in the run up to that. And we wish you every success in that and hope to be involved in it, because really all that you do is just, it's so important. I know that Kenny will speak a bit more about that Mayo connection relationship, but I suppose just to say, it's so wonderful to see the connection between John Carroll University and NUIG. I think when you start to make those people-to-people links at a young age, that's when it becomes really, really important that the next generation, I suppose, can really live that Irish heritage and live those connections. Before I close, I just want to chat just very briefly about another important month that we're living through. Obviously, it's Irish Heritage Month or St. Patrick's Month. It's also International Women's Month. And I know that Global Cleveland has a whole series of events planned. I suppose celebrating the contribution of Irish women in the diaspora is something that we've been doing for a number of years. We celebrate it in February. We call it St. Bridget's Day. St. Bridget was Ireland's other patron saint. And on the 1st of February every year, we celebrate St. Bridget's Day with a whole series of events around the contribution of Irish women, both at home in Ireland and in the diaspora. And I know that we look forward to working with Global Cleveland as we go into the future on events for that. So happy to take any questions later on, but for now, just to wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Month and St. Patrick's Day when it comes down the line. And I'll hand back over to Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Consul General Byrne, and we are very eager, obviously, to get you down to Cleveland. And obviously, you mentioned the Mayo connection there, and yeah, it's a thriving community here in Cleveland, and even throughout Ohio, there's other Irish communities here too. So we really look forward to getting you down here and getting you out and about in Ohio. So thanks for that. We look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting down. Thanks, Mark.
Oh, absolutely. And I saw a big smile on our next speaker's face when Consul General mentioned Mayo and Ireland. And Kenny Deery obviously is a very good friend to the city of Cleveland and familiar with the sister city relationship. And Kenny's currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Galway Chamber, but he has been instrumental in the relationship with the Achill Cleveland sister city connection over the years and has been here many times. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Kenny.
Good, Mark. Ambassador Mulhall, Consul General Byrne, Joe, Mark, Chris. It's more an honour than Vehig and Crinnew Shaw. West of Ireland and Cleveland, it's a fascinating story, and Ambassador Mulhall, I could listen to you all afternoon and evening. It's evening here, but the origins to this twinning or sister city engagement has stemmed, as we said, from patterns of immigration over the years, and in particular the parish of Achill to Cleveland. There are many tributes and nods to this past around the Angle and the Flats area, Cam's Corner and Battery Park in Cleveland, among others. And I think such was the level of clustering of Achill and Mayo people that about 20 years ago, it was agreed that we needed to formally recognize this and potentially build on the opportunities that could be harnessed from a twinning. And as you said, and rightly so, these things take energy and they take refreshing and they take an investment of time and energy. But that started a dialogue between the likes of Steve Malloy, Con Mangan, Terence Diver, Jerry Quinn, Colleen Corrigan-Day, and many others on both sides. And formally then Mayo County Council and the City of Cleveland endorsed this idea. And as one would say, a twinning was born in 2003. And the Mayo Society of Greater Cleveland and Cólach for Báisiúlachta have been the two key players in this, supported by Mayo County Council and Údarás na Gaeltachta, which is the Enterprise Development Agency for the West of Ireland Gaeltacht. And they have enabled the sustainment of this over the last 2 decades. And I know we have colleagues from Mayo and indeed from Údarás na Gaeltachta, I know Sinead Niarth and Shauna Custel and others are on the call this evening. I think the best gesture that captures the essence of this are some specifically produced clocks that read 2 continents, 2 time zones, 1 community. And you'll find some of those out in the Westside Irish American Club, in the courts downtown, and equally in the heart of Achill in Oras Farbachakla. Many positives have come from this over the last near 2 decades, and I'm certain will continue to come as a result of this into the future, because there are so many passionate people involved in it. Economically, we in Coleg Farbachakla and with the support of partners in Údarás and Mayo County Council and others, have been able to bring over 50 businesses from the west of Ireland to Cleveland to pitch their wares both in Ohio and using Ohio as a launchpad location for US market entry. These range from technology businesses looking to meet people in Jumpstart, food producers, for example, smoked salmon producers, energy drinks producers, looking to pitch to Heinens and using the local connections in Cleveland to get in the door, to drinks companies looking to pitch their wares to the Great Lakes Brewery and others. There have been fascinating encounters over time and real game changers in terms of the network and the power of the network of the Irish community, the Mayo community, and indeed the Achill community in Cleveland. At present, with my chamber hat on, and some would say it's Mayo, it's West Mayo, it's Galway Chamber, it's the west of Ireland. And I think that's the way that we, at a level, if we're looking at the west of Ireland and looking about sustainably developing, we wear that combined hat. And at present in chamber, we're working with 2 Cleveland-based businesses looking to use the west of Ireland as their launchpad into EU markets. And the ambassador referenced Brexit and the whole fallout of that. I think, look and remember now, as a result of Brexit, we are the only English-speaking country in the EU. The quality of life in the west of Ireland is fantastic, and the cost of living, like in Cleveland, is far less than our bigger named urban neighbours. So I think there's significant opportunity for us to do more on that and leverage the reciprocal arrangement and nature of our relationship. The annual Mayo Cleveland Ball itself, run by a hard-working volunteer committee chaired by Jerry Quinn and Tom Scanlon, is a fundraiser that came out of this twinning, and it enables contributions to be made to the upkeep of the Irish Cultural Gardens. It helps fund a scholarship, as you mentioned, Kevin, between John Carroll University and NUI Galway on a reciprocal arrangement annually. A project we're very proud of in the West is the Achill Experience Aquarium and Visitor Centre. And one of the first allocations of funding for that project came from a breakfast event at about 7:30 in the morning in Terminal Tower in Cleveland, where our diaspora were not found wanting and wanted to buy bricks for $1,000 each. And if you walk into that project in Achill and you look to the left, there's the Cleveland Wall, and you've got all the diaspora family names who really wanted to support that project. I think if you look from a cultural and tourism perspective, we've worked closely in the West with the likes of Margaret Lynch, Executive Director of the Irish American Archives, on curating content. We receive each year a delegation of Irish students from St. Ignatius and Walsh Jesuit schools. They used to come to Dublin and Belfast on an Irish Studies program, should I say. But now, in addition, they come to the West to immerse themselves in the richness of our cultural heritage, and they get a sense of what is this unique diaspora and where people came from. I think a brilliant example of how this twinning has evolved and pivoted in other ways is only last year, and unfortunately COVID has scuppered it, but I know she's a determined lady who will run with this. Mary Quinn Griffin of Case Western Reserve was bringing a delegation of trainee nursing staff who were undergoing their, what we would call, third level education in Case Western Reserve. She was bringing them to West Mayo to do part of their formal community outreach training in places like Achill Island and Clare Island, as opposed to anywhere else. And I think, Mark, and you've been well familiar with a lot of the engagement that we've had over the years. Myself, I've done, and I've really seen an evolution in Cleveland over the years. And Ambassador, you talked about the Cleveland Clinic and its evolving role. Many great people have, in the west of Ireland, trained out of there. And I know Dr. Brian Griffin has been central in that as well. But over my 15 trips to Cleveland, I just come back each time energized, refreshed, but also with a really rich understanding of the willingness of people to help and to try and do more. And I think as a twinning and as this evolves, and Kevin, we look forward to meeting you hopefully on the 25th of September, if we're allowed travel to this year's Mayo Cleveland Ball, where you'll get a sense of that on the ground. But I think there's significant opportunity and potential to build on what has already been achieved by many great people.
Thanks, Kenny. Some great words there. And yeah, you mentioned some great people over the years that have been involved, and long may it continue. And we do hope and look forward to hopefully seeing everyone in September, October for the next installment of the Mayo Ball. Real quick, I'll wrap up before we go into the Q&A, and just, it's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of obviously the Irish Business Network in Cleveland and also RelateCare. And Kenny mentioned a lot about the Cleveland Clinic and the relationships forged here in Cleveland, and the RelateCare story is no different. I mean, it started as an initiative between the Cleveland Clinic and Rigney Dolphin, based in Waterford originally, Ambassador Mulhall's hometown. We've just flourished ever since then. So Cleveland has become a home there, our US headquarters, and the Irish network has tied into that in terms of, we've other companies like RelateCare or other business folks come into Cleveland. We try and make those connections for them when they come here, make sure they're introduced to the right people, be it the mayor's office, be it the county executive, some of the nonprofit organizations. So we try and facilitate those meetings as much as we can, and our doors are always open. Especially now during COVID times, and we have a strong membership here of local, business owners, both Irish American, that are very actively involved in our organization. And again, looking forward to connecting with organizations like in the future. So just moving along, then, I know we're kind of pressed for time, but I'd be remiss if I didn't move into some Q&A here with Ambassador Mulhall. And Ambassador Mulhall, here, I got some questions that have come in from some of the audience and some that were submitted. We'll just go through these and answer these as you can, and we'll go where we can with this. One of the first questions that came in was regarding the UN Security Council seat. Ireland recently took up a seat on the UN Security Council for the next 2 years, on the back of a campaign theme of empathy, partnership, and independence. Can you talk about what role Ireland will play, and why is it important for us to be a part of this powerful UN body? You're on mute.
Yeah, first of all, I would say that, we as a country have an obligation, I would say, to be good global citizens, a bit like individuals in their own country ought to be good citizens, ought to play their part in the fabric of their country or their community or whatever. And we belong to an international community of, say, 200 members of the UN, and roughly every 20 years we seek to become a member of the Security Council, which puts us in a small category, which is 15 members of the Security Council, 5 of whom are permanent members, the US, the UK, France, China, and Russia, and the other 10 are elected from different parts of the world. And we were elected last year from the European and other groups. So it's Europe and other countries that are connected with Europe are part of that group. But we were elected by the entire body of the UN. So everyone has a vote, even though it's for a regional grouping. And so we go into this, and I think we've become a different country over the last 30 years or 20 years even of my career. I mean, when I started first, remember, in 1978, when I first joined the Foreign Service, we had 25 missions overseas. Now we have 90. So you can see that it's been transformed completely, right? When I joined, we were only barely members of the European Union a few years before we became members. And we were still, I think, we were kind of the odd man out in the European Union. Now we're very much central. That's central to what we are. We're very much, committed Europeans, and we're one of the, the most successful and prosperous economies in the European Union these days. So I think the feeling in Ireland is, my feeling certainly is strongly that we need to contribute something to the global environment. We've benefited from free flows of trade and investment, which has transformed our country, along with the education and investment we made over the years to make sure our people were ready to contribute and to be effective operators in the new global economy. So we now have to pay back, and that's why we've taken on this role. And by the way, we have had to increase the number of our diplomats in New York considerably. We've had to put a lot of resources into getting ourselves elected, first of all, because it wasn't easy. We were up against Canada and Norway, 2 very tough competitors, 2 very difficult countries to beat. We managed to more or less draw even with Norway, and we were a number of votes ahead of Canada. So we got one of the 2 seats available. So what we're doing is we're trying to do a number of things. First of all, we've been given a role with regard to Iran. very controversial issue about the UN resolution that deals with Iran, that deals with sanctions on Iran and so forth. We have the pen on that, as they say. We'll be responsible for managing that resolution over the next 2 years. We also have a role with regard to humanitarian aid for Syria, which is another controversial issue which has been on the international agenda for some time. Plus, we're dealing with the issue of climate and security, which is a growing issue, a new kind of issue on the global agenda, the impact of climate change on global security. And we have a role as well in the area of women, peace and security. But more than that, we will try to contribute in all of the issues that come before the Security Council. This month, for example, there's a big discussion of Ethiopia and Tigray, what's happening there. And Ireland will try to bring an independent mind, a sympathetic approach, and an ability to bridge gaps between the different groups within the within the Security Council. Because remember, they're often, you have 5 countries have a veto on everything, and they don't always agree with each other. So we can play a role as a country that has a kind of an ability to relate to all sides. We hope we can play a mediating role, and that we can acquit ourselves. And we're not just there to make up the numbers. We want to make a difference. And I hope we can make a difference in a number of areas, including the ones I mentioned to do with Iran, Syria, climate and security, and women, peace and security. But across the board, we'll be trying to use our particular Irish skills in order to facilitate better decisions, more effective action on the part of the Security Council with regard to global security issues.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next question is actually a question from, I think, someone you may know very well, Liz Shanahan, based in London.
Of course, well, yes.
Yeah, so given the presence of multiple Irish companies in the US healthcare space, can you talk about how much Ireland punches above its weight in healthcare, in particular here in the US?
Well, I mean, first of all, a big proportion of our exports to the United States are in the pharmaceutical and healthcare sectors. So that's one area. And I want to make the point that during the last year, there's a lot of emphasis now on supply chains. The US government has initiated a review of supply chains into the United States to avoid vulnerabilities. What I want to say here now today is that the supply chains from Ireland to the United States have been absolutely unaffected by the pandemic. And if a supply chain can survive a pandemic, it'll survive anything, right? So we have proven that we are a trusted partner of the United States, including, particularly in the area of pharmaceutical and medical devices. And what happens is that US companies based in Ireland were exporting to all over the world from Ireland and from the US as well, but from Ireland. Some of their products they produce for global distribution in Ireland. And then a proportion of that production goes back to the United States, because the United States is a big purchaser of pharmaceutical products and medical devices. And that's why we have this enormous trade export of pharmaceutical and medical devices with the United States. Second thing is a lot of Irish companies are active in the healthcare area, because typically in Ireland, for those who don't know our economy, what happens is that a multinational maybe comes in and you get a number coming in say the healthcare area or the pharmaceutical area, and that generates a local ecosystem to support those companies. And then you end up getting Irish companies emerging in those same fields, drawing on expertise that maybe Irish business people have acquired while working for US companies, and then set up their own companies and start to grow those companies. And one of the best examples, obviously RelateCare is one very good example in the work they do in providing services to US healthcare providers all over this country. But a second example is ICON, which is one of the biggest medical devices and pharmaceutical testing companies in the world. And that's got about 5,000 people employed with them in the United States. So they're a big part of the Irish involvement in the healthcare sector. And of course, then during the pandemic, we have seen so many Irish doctors and nurses and so on, and people in the healthcare industry, appearing on television talking about these issues, because of course, a lot of Irish people over the years have come here and have contributed to the healthcare system. And of course, some of the big healthcare companies here are run by Irish people. So across the board, the Irish impact, the Irish input into the US pharmaceutical and healthcare system is very substantial indeed, and likely to grow as more and more Irish companies come into this market, bringing with them products that are relevant to the healthcare sector.
Thank you. Next up from the chat room, we got Tim Zizak. Would love to hear thoughts on European IT regulation and any impact it may have on the Irish IT sector, which has many US software companies based there.
Well, of course, the thing to know about this for those who, why should you be familiar with European Union law, but those who are not, and I'm sure there are many who are not, and many in Ireland who are not as well, by the way, and all over Europe. But the point is that the digital economy, the Facebooks, the Twitter, and those, most of which, Amazon, most of which have big operations in Ireland. They employ thousands of people in Ireland in many cases. Google has about 8,000 people in Ireland, for example. Those companies are regulated for the whole of the European Union from Ireland. Now that might seem strange because, but that's the way it is. So even though we have a population of 5 million, we are regulating Facebook for the 550 million people all over the European Union, which means we got to invest a lot of resources in our regulator, because the regulator is not just doing it for a small country like ours, it's doing it for the whole of the European Union. And that means, of course, that we have to reflect. I mean, that the European Union is not one country; it's 27 different countries, and they all have somewhat different attitudes towards these things about privacy and digital economy and so on. And I think it's fair to say that the digital economy has become one of the hot potatoes in political life all over the world, but in particular in the United States and the European Union. And there are conflicting forces at work here. On the one hand, you have those who want to tax the digital economy with particular taxes. We're opposed to that. We don't believe there's a strict distinction between the digital economy and the regular economy. We feel that every company now has some kind of digital component to what it does, and therefore having a separate tax for digital services doesn't seem to us to make a huge amount of sense, unless, of course, that tax is universal and therefore it doesn't distort competition. Second thing, of course, is considerations of privacy and data storage. And then there's also the issue of the enormous influence that these companies have over the public life of the world, because they are carrying huge amounts of information into homes and into people's phones and laptops all over the world. And the question is, how should those companies be regulated? So this is an evolving debate, and there's a lot going on in this area at the moment. And it's the question is how to reconcile economic efficiency, dynamism in the digital economy, innovation with protecting people's rights, protecting free speech, but at the same time not allowing these platforms to infect our public space with sort of mad ideas. So there's a lot going on there, and I think these are challenges that not just for Ireland or for the European Union, for the whole world, and in particular for the United States and the European Union, because between us, probably most of this activity is taking place on the territory of the United States or the European Union, but it is having an effect globally. And we have to work together in trying to figure out ways in which we can make this sector serve the interests of our peoples and not take us down roads that would be unproductive and even perilous.
Thank you. Great question. Great answer. Next up, we got Dr. Ray Davis. Dr. Ray has a question. Does Ambassador Mulhall see an opportunity from the UK-EU trade agreement for the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland to collaborate together in enhancing a unique relationship, particularly in trade with the United States and maybe in particular Cleveland, maybe with the help of an organization like Global Cleveland?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, first of all, Brexit is a bad day's work, right? There is no good version of Brexit from an Irish point of view, because it does create barriers between Ireland and Britain in terms of trade and investment, because we're now no longer in the same universe when it comes to regulation and trade and so forth. Now, there are no tariffs, but there are certainly barriers to trade now, which didn't exist last year, because there's a lot of documentation has to be completed, and we're actually realizing just how convenient the single market was compared to what we have now and what we had before the single market came into being 20 odd years ago. So there's a big downside to Brexit for everyone, but for Britain in particular, but also for Ireland, because we still have a very important trading relationship with the UK. As far as Northern Ireland is concerned, the whole idea behind the Northern Ireland Protocol is to make Northern Ireland unique, right? Now, you might say, well, why do we in Ireland, why do we in the other part of Ireland, in the other part of our island, why do we go along with this idea of giving Northern Ireland an advantage? Because it would be the only place in the world that would have total access to the UK market and free access to the European single market. So why do we give Northern Ireland that advantage? Because there is a special set of circumstances applying in Northern Ireland. They're still recovering from 30 years of conflict. And therefore, the idea behind the protocol is to give Northern Ireland a unique status, to give them this advantage. And we need to exploit that, and they need to exploit that. And I think they will try to exploit that, because, you know, if you're, for example, an American company and you want to invest in Europe, well, Northern Ireland now has a particular set of advantages because it has access to both the UK market and the European single market. But for us, it's a good thing if Northern Ireland prospers, because it underpins peace in Northern Ireland. When Northern Ireland is doing well economically, peace is strengthened and reinforced. And secondly, when Northern Ireland does well economically, we do well too, because more people from Northern Ireland will come south for holidays or will buy products from us or whatever. So the whole island of Ireland, to some degree, is a single economic unit. And I think that we will see more cross-border trade and economic cooperation developing in the coming years and decades. But there still is that political sort of issue of the unhappiness of some people in Northern Ireland about the protocol, which leads to uncertainty about the future, and that's not good. And we need to get over that in order that Northern Ireland and the whole island of Ireland can benefit from the special circumstances, the special arrangements that apply to Northern Ireland under the Northern Ireland Protocol, and giving Northern Ireland that special status, which it ought to be able to exploit to its advantage and to the advantage of the economy of the whole island of Ireland.
Thank you. Our final question is, in more recent times, I'm bringing it back stateside, I guess. Your wife Greta and yourself were fortunate enough to attend the recent inauguration of President Joe Biden.
Yes.
And a momentous day. His story is part of a wider Irish story that has been a moment of great pride and celebration in today's Ireland. How do you see the relationship between Ireland and the new administration evolving, and how difficult has it been to kick it off with a pretty much a virtual relationship to start with? And then the second part of that question is, I know there's requests at Ireland stuff to set up a presidential visit and things. That are those conversations you have as part of that kind of relationship?
Look, every US presidency represents a new era, because in America, unlike Ireland and other European countries, when the administration changes, a lot of people at the top that we would regard as being civil servants or public servants, they change and new people come in. So every new administration poses a challenge for embassies and governments around the world, having to find new people to talk to, having to engage with new people and make sure that they understand where we're coming from. And of course, that is uniquely difficult at the moment because of the pandemic and the fact that it militates against face-to-face contact. Now, we're beginning to see more of that. And as time goes on, as the vaccine is rolled out more fully around the country, I dare say we will see, more face-to-face activities taking place in Washington, which will be advantageous from our point of view. So, but I would say that for me anyway, the great thing about, and in Ireland and all countries, we work with whoever is in power in Washington That's who we work with. We don't create the playing field. We play the field as we find it, right? So we were able to work with the previous administration. I had good contacts there, and I maintained them, and I did everything I could to ensure that Irish relations with the US remained on an even keel, which they did over the last 4 years. But obviously, having somebody in the White House who actually has a passionate interest in Ireland, who knows about Ireland. I mean, for example, I came across this during the week, which is fascinating. 40 years ago, in 1981, the new Congressional Friends of Ireland was established by Tip O'Neill, Senator Edward Kennedy, Governor Hugh Carey of New York, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan. They were the four main figures, they were called the Four Horsemen at the time. But one of the first names on their inaugural statement was Senator Joseph Biden of Delaware. So he was involved in the Congressional Friends of Ireland from the very beginning. And we're now celebrating this year 40 years of that very, very influential caucus, which, by the way, played a very important role last year in supporting Ireland in preventing a hard border from being imposed on the island of Ireland and protecting our peace process against the ravages of Brexit, which could potentially have undermined peace in Ireland. So that caucus, 40 years old, of which President Joe Biden was a founding member, has played an important role in the last year in protecting the open border on the island of Ireland. So I'm looking forward to working with the new administration. I've already been in contact with them quite a lot. Obviously, we're planning now St. Patrick's Day. And by the way, planning a virtual St. Patrick's Day is no joke, because the actual St. Patrick's Day, we know how to do it because we've done it umpteen times. But organizing a virtual St. Patrick's Day is a bit more challenging, actually, because, you have to kind of find new ways of doing things, that using virtual platforms instead of face-to-face activity. But as I said in the beginning, I yearn for next year when we can have a proper St. Patrick's Day and when we can really celebrate having a proud Irish American in the White House celebrating St. Patrick's Day with a visiting Taoiseach who will be there face-to-face with the president rather than speaking to him over a virtual platform like this. And I also look forward to the day when I can get back to Cleveland, okay? Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Yeah, we absolutely can't wait to have you back here, and obviously have Kevin here for his first visit. And Kenny, I know you're jumping at the chance to get on a plane and get back to Cleveland, so we can't wait for those moments and celebrate together. And I'm going to turn it back to Joe Simperman here from Global Cleveland to kind of close us out from here. We appreciate everyone staying on a few minutes later as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Ambassador Mulhall, to our Consul General, Mr. Kevin Byrne, to our Galway Chamber Leader, Mr. Kenny Deery, of course, to our Renaissance man, Mark Owens, for leading a really robust conversation, to the staff at Global Cleveland and everyone who made today possible, all of our attendees. Thank you so much. Thanks again to RelateCare. A happy Irish Heritage Month to all. A happy St. Patrick's Day. Sláinte. Thank you, everyone.
And so say all of us. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone.
Thank you, Ambassador.